and the live stream will be there. I wanted to have some way for people to like sign up in advance and get reminders. So
Only put them in front of the camera. Sound good? All right.
If you want to go turn that camera back on.
Okay, I think we got audio now. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. If you're out there and you can hear us, thank you. We'll start over, and let me adjust my camera so we can get Jackie in this as well. All right, I got the word that you all can hear us now. Again, welcome to College Matters, the podcast where we're going to dive deep into the challenges and opportunities shaping the future of higher education. My name is Jeff Beckham Jr. I serve as CEO of Chicago Scholars, and today we're tackling a critical issue, the growing disinvestment in the college pathway on both state and national levels. As funding declines and societal attitudes towards higher education shift, what does this mean for students, particularly those from underrepresented communities? In this episode, we'll explore how these trends are reshaping access, equity, and opportunities, and discuss the vital roles organizations like Chicago Scholars and communities play in bridging the gap. Whether you're an educator, a policymaker, or passionate advocate, this conversation is one you don't want to miss. So let's get started by introducing our outstanding guest today. Jackie, can you briefly introduce yourself and share how the issue of disinvestment in the path to college access intersects with your daily work?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Jeff, and thank you to Chicago Scholars as well. So as Jeff said, I'm Jackie Neri Arias. I use she, her pronouns. And my current role is actually at Dominican University as the Executive Director of Student Involvement and Inclusion. And the inclusion part really matters, right? Because although, sort of the majority of my role is student affairs, it's specifically working with students from historically marginalized backgrounds. And a lot of what that means, right, is making sure that students have access to education all the way from when they enter, right, when they enroll, when they learn about us, until they graduate and accessing post-college opportunities.
Sure.
So a lot of the work that I do really, involves making sure that students are able to, students depend from, all the investments that whether the university, private donors, or state funding is providing us.
So let's dive into your why. Jackie, what motivates you in this space to do this work, and what trends or challenges have you personally observed regarding college access?
So, I'm a proud Chicago Scholar, right? So when I was in high school, I was also a High Side Scholar. So shout out to any High Side scholars or employees that are watching. I learned a lot. I was connected to a CBO, and then through that CBO, I got connected to Chicago Scholars, right? Mm-hmm. So my why really came from understanding that my success was not only due to my own effort, right? It was really a result of my family support, right? Even if I was a first generation college graduate, so it wasn't just that I was, sort of doing it alone, or that my family wasn't able to support in the ways that other non-first generation families were supporting, but it was that they had the investment, right? And the investment came from the education from groups like Chicago Scholars and High Side and the many other CBOs, right? So my why now is giving back, right? Mm-hmm. It's understanding that it takes students like myself, right, to be in positions of leadership to be able to sort of, provide culturally relevant support.
Yeah. In your work, you've probably seen the pathway to college evolve quite a bit from the time you started to even experience having to apply and do your search to now. Maybe you can speak a little bit to how the pathway to college in 2025 compares to previous years, and what major shifts have you noticed for students and families in their approach to higher education?
Absolutely. So, what I would say to that, I was reflecting on this before, and for sure the path has changed drastically from when I started to now, right? But even if you go back a few decades from that, right? Mm-hmm. If you think about maybe, 30, 40 years ago, students that were applying to colleges and their families sort of understood that they would likely be able to afford college, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. They knew that whatever aid they received from the state, from the school, federal government, they would be able to afford it, right? They'd be able to graduate and graduate in 4 years and make an income, right? What we know about today's generation, including my own, right, is that when you're applying to college, you already know you can't afford it. Even families with high income, right, 6-figure families know that they will not be able to afford their stay, right? Yeah. So they're depending now on, again, the investment of the state, of the federal government, and again, private donations.
Oh, wow, that's a lot there to unpack. I'm sure in that as you talk to families and work with students, they're sharing some concerns around what you just shared. What adding with the cost of college obviously being probably the biggest one, what are other concerns or things you're hearing from students around the supports they're receiving or lack thereof?
So, again, I think what I see the most for sure are the financial challenges, right? And this sort of the fact that finances are a barrier to even accessing education, and even the ones that do make it often might not be able to stay, right? So for sure, just economic disparities are our number one challenge. But then some other things that I see, right, are the fact that our students, they have intersectional identities, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not just income that is determining their experience at their institutions, right? It's also race, right?
Yeah.
Ethnicity, immigration status, right? So the school that I work at now, right, Dominican University, is a Hispanic serving institution with a large population, actually a majority of students identifying as Hispanic, and as well as about maybe 10% identifying as undocumented. And then I was a part of a call recently that I learned that 1 in 3 students in Illinois are now actually from Chicago, right, are going to be from either mixed status families or undocumented themselves, right? So when you think about all of these different factors, right, being a student of color, right, majority of CPI students are students of color. These are the students that are coming into our institutions, so therefore their experiences are being shaped by their identities that they bring in, but also the fact that institutions were not really built for them, right? The systems have not changed enough or rapidly enough to really serve them appropriately.
And we know systems are designed intentionally to do the things they're supposed to for the reasons they are. Um, let's shift a little bit here and talk about investment and disinvestment trends. I read recently that we're losing one private institution to two a year in our country. The rapid decline we know in Illinois, both Columbia, University of Chicago faced large budget deficits in the last year. Where do you currently see the most significant investment in higher education? And conversely, where is the disinvestment most apparent? And what impact this is actually having on our students?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? And I think it's one that leaders really need to be leaders, at the state level, but also at institutional level need to be really aware of, right?
Mhm.
Where is it that the investment is going towards, right? Where are we seeing the most money being distributed? And what I see, right, when I think about specifically, right, sort of at the sort of college level, right, I see the institutions are investing the most in STEM fields, right, and that it's important for students to know that, right, when they're applying to colleges, when they're selecting a major, right,
Yeah.
so that they understand where will they receive the most resources. But the other piece of that, right, sort of the piece that we need to be really cognizant of is the fact that not all our students might be successful or even have an interest in a STEM field,
Yeah.
right? Liberal arts are just as important in that. So when we think about how investment is being really, determined by outcomes in certain programs like STEM programs, right? Degree attainment in particular areas, faculty, right, that conduct research in particular areas, and that's the only way that outcomes are being or sort of metrics are being utilized to determine success, right, and determine who is worthy of investment. It really puts institutions like my own, MSIs, right, Hispanic serving institutions, HBCUs, at a disadvantage, right, as well as community colleges. Yeah. We really, my thought process is that that's not necessarily the ways that students are demonstrating their success to us now, right? So we need to think about liberatory outcomes that are outside of the just enrollment, graduation rates, right, GPA, etc.
It's good. Institutions like Dominican are doing a great job of thinking holistically about the entire student. We've got the opportunity in the last year to visit a lot of universities across the country, alongside our director of partnerships here at Chicago, managing director of partnerships here at Chicago Scholars, and we saw firsthand like schools who are saying, STEM is important. However, we don't want to forget about the humanities and social sciences that also shape the world we live in. I think that those societal narratives around where we're headed, of course, the importance and proliferation of AI is important. We can't forget about like all of the other things that matter in this world. There's no historians, we don't know where we've come from to know where we're going. If we don't have writers that can, share and document things that can express the truths that we're experiencing, I think it can pose and be a challenge. So as we think about societal narratives, such as debates around the cost of college and the cost of college degree, the value of certain majors, or whether a degree is essential for career success, shaping investments in traditional education pathways, what are the potential benefits and drawbacks of these shifting perspectives?
I think there's a lot of drawbacks to it, right? I think the main drawback is you might sort of completely, exclude an entire generation of talented students, right?
Yeah.
A talented workforce that might never make it to a college, right? Because they're just not able to afford it. So if when you measure success simply on again, things like GPAs and degree attainment in particular areas, then you might be completely missing, right? Critical thinkers, social justice minded individuals, and individuals that can really change structures. They can impact organizations, right? And that they're ready to really supervise, lead the next generation of workers, right? And at the end of the day, right, all these students, whether they get a degree or not, are eventually going to join the workforce, right? Yeah. So it's really important that we are thinking about what is it that I always like to flip this, right? I get asked the question a lot of what are families losing when we're not thinking about investing in education, right? Mm-hmm. But it's also, what is the institution losing, right? What is society losing? What is the city losing, right? When we're not investing in our own people, right?
Yeah. One of the things we always share when we're getting students together, helping them prepare for on-site, is that they are the customer, that you should go into this with the approach of looking at the value the institution can provide to you, but also that, realizing you're bringing value as well. So when you speak to that, I think it's a really important point that we want to make sure we continue to think about to help our young people and our families think about as well. Yeah, you have to apply to get in, but the minute you're in, you're now a customer paying for a service. And so I think the more we push on that point, there's a greater opportunity for young people to really continue to maximize the agency they have in the space in the search process through the school. With this growing disinvestment in some of the narratives in higher education, do you feel like programs like Chicago Scholars can help bridge the gap for students? And if so, how can these other organizations, not just us, provide meaningful support in ways that systemically funding alone can?
I love this question. I have to say, this is my favorite question, especially because, again, like I sort of stay wherever I can, right? Whenever I have a platform, it's, the success of students from historically marginalized backgrounds, and actually of any student, is due to their community, right? Mm-hmm. It's due to the support that they received from their family, even when they're first generation, right? From their teachers, from their mentors, from people who really invested in their success overall, right? And who really saw them as people, right? Who saw them as individuals who were better than the circumstances that they were born into, right? Yeah. So what I think when I think about CBOs like Chicago Scholars is it's crucial to investing in education involves investing in organizations like Chicago Scholars, right? Because you're providing the support that students need to be exposed to higher education, right? Be exposed to opportunities that are beyond, the workforce careers, that they might have learned about from their families, from their communities. It really kind of opens up doors, right? Mm-hmm. In a way that that many of us might not have been exposed to before, right? So I think I'm forever grateful for organizations like Chicago Scholars that provided me the opportunity, but also are providing my students the opportunity, right? The reality is schools like Dominican, right, that really, again, depend on the support that students received before they got to us. We need you, right? Yeah. We need you to continue to do your work so that when they get to us, they have all the skills, and the truth is they probably already have a lot of these assets and skills. It's just maybe no one before an organization like Chicago Scholars might have pushed them to that limit, right? Mm-hmm.
I use the analogy often that we have a keen ability to find amazing roses that are already planted in our concrete jungles throughout our city. All we do is, remove all the debris and the things in our communities that are impediments, the systemic barriers, so that the institutions can see these roses, and so can our corporate partners and career providing institutions. That, there's not a lot that we ever had to do with someone like you. You're dynamic, other than find and help, set up the opportunities for the right connections to exist. And when you're low income or first generation, we know a lot of times you don't have the societal, social capital or economic capital to make that happen. And I think institutions like Chicago Scholars are really important in doing that work. When people ask more overly, largely, what do we do? That's what we do for young people to college and to their careers.
If I can even add to
absolutely.
that too, right? I think another thought that sort of is coming to my mind is, in addition to supporting the students, you're doing it in a culturally relevant way, right? And I think it's many times, right, throughout my career and in general, right, I think we all know those people who are really well intentioned, right? They really, really want to do right. They really, really care about education for marginalized communities, but they might not understand what it is that students actually need, right?
Yeah.
And sort of providing all the money in the world may not actually be enough to have a student be successful and to have the outcomes that are going to make them reach their full potential, right?
Hit it on the head. I think when you talk about cultural relevance and the unique identities of our scholars, we know SCOTUS last year decided to eliminate race-based admissions for higher education. We've already seen a decline in the enrollment of Black and Brown students across the country in particular. How has this trend appeared in your work experience?
Yeah, it's a tough question, right? And just as a higher education professional, I've had to think a lot about what that means, right? What affirmative action meant for our students.
Sure.
And even with this SCOTUS decision, it doesn't go away, right? The work is still being done, even with DEI under attack at on a national level. Even at a state level, right? We need to be paying attention about, on that within Illinois too. It's really important that we remember that, first of all, these students aren't going anywhere, right? Students from historically marginalized backgrounds, Black and Brown students are just increasing in the numbers that they attend college, right? So that work isn't disappearing, right? So I definitely want to sort of emphasize that, right? That no policy, no law can actually make the work go away, right? But on the other end, it makes it a lot harder, right? It really makes us have to rely on more creative ways, on more strategic ways, right? And we also have to, I think, be concerned about exposing students to education earlier, right? Instead of we can't start talking to students about applying to college when they're a senior in high school, right? Which is, again, why CBOs matter so much.
I think you hit it on the head. We know college readiness doesn't start in high school. It begins through a student's entire K through 12 experience, working with families and parents and working on those external factors like parental education is key. And what tools or resources have made a difference for students earlier in their education, things that you've seen in the market?
I think, the work that, again, when I'm actually doing this sort of mini study at Dominican with my new role overseeing CBOs and our relationships with CBOs, and I really want to understand how do CBO students, right, students that graduated and came with us from a CBO, how are they compared? What are their success levels compared to students who did not come to us from a CBO, right? And what I can hypothesize, right, just early on already is that CBO students are truly more prepared, right? It doesn't mean they're smarter or better really in any way. It's more that they just come more prepared, right? Because they had a network of people, whether it was, again, educators or mentors, right, who first of all told them we believe in you, right? And then also equipped them with the right tools, right? With advocacy skills, with civic mindedness, right? The understanding that the university was made for you, right? You need to actually go and seek those resources out and utilize the resources, right? So that's really, I think, the biggest impact that I see.
Some argue that this investment isn't just about dollars. It's about ensuring quality education and informed choices are being made. For example, while free college programs aim to reduce the financial barriers, they don't always address the disparities in educational quality or fit. What's your perspective on these challenges, and how do cost and accessibility impact the decisions students make about where to attend college and what to study.
Yeah, that's a really important question to consider as well, right? And especially with my work with undocumented students, I think about that a lot, right?
Hmm.
Where are students choosing to attend college really at this point depends on the sticker price,
Hmm.
right? First, can they afford it, but also do they believe they can afford it, right? Do they have the right information to understand that there are resources out there, scholarships that are made for them specifically, right? And then also, right, I put the onus a little bit on the universities themselves um, to make their resources or scholarships, their support systems more known, right? When you go out into the community and try to recruit students, right, it's important to build relationships with CPOs. It's important to inform families that this is a place that you could be, right? Especially those high sticker price colleges, right? Those private colleges, like the one I attended, right, Kenyon, where I received a really high financial aid package. But when I first looked at that sticker price, I had, no doubt in my mind, this is not a place that I could attend.
Yeah, I went through that this summer with my nephew who is at Judson University, private Baptist school here in Elgin. And, you get the sticker point of $40,000,
Mhm.
even for a family with some means, it's still a lot of money, right? And I would, continue to tell my sister and my nephew, just wait, the package will come through, there'll be adjustments to that. I think the other thing that students don't know, and we work with them a lot on this, is that when that package comes, you actually can then negotiate. There's an opportunity to reach back out, write letters, talk to your institutions, and have conversations around how to make that accessible and affordable for you. So I think like more knowledge at the core of this is something that's really key.
Well, I just wanted to add, right? I think the other kind of danger that happens, right? The risk that we run is that students are being undermatched, right?
Yeah.
When they're only making their decision, when the sort of the primary factor, or maybe the only factor that they're considering when selecting a college is the price, right?
Yeah.
The cost of it, then they might actually end up going somewhere that is not suited for them, right? Where they might not be as successful as had they attended a different institution, right?
And going to an academic undermatch is just as detrimental as the debt you may take on and going to a school that can be funded. The bigger risk is taking on debt and not finishing school. So you think about that in perspective of, and that happens. Young people go to an undermatch, take on a lot of debt. There's no supports there to help them through. They've got $30,000 to $40,000 in loans with no degree, and that is the worst possible outcome when we talk about this space and work that we hope for.
It's
So
like the cycle of poverty continues, right?
yeah,
If now you're no degree, now you have more debt, right? And at the end of the day, the institution isn't necessarily losing much, right? It's about retention numbers, right?
That's right.
And I don't want to say that that's the only thing, but often that can feel like that's the only thing that we're measuring, right?
Yeah. As we close in our last question, just want to ask, a lot is being made around policy right now. The Brookings Institute study argues that the total amount of funding allocated to colleges and universities is substantially more than how states, it matters substantially more than how states actually distribute that funding. First, do you agree? And then secondly, what policy or funding changes would you advocate for to improve outcomes for students?
Yeah, so I read the report, right, just to make sure that I understood exactly why they might have said that, because I think the initial statement, I don't agree, right? I don't agree with it because, well, I think what they found in general, what the researcher found was that, it does matter that states are investing as much as they possibly can in universities, right?
Yeah.
But how it is distributed really does matter, right? Because the reality that we see right now is that institutions like Dominican, right, Hispanic serving institutions or MSIs or HBCUs, right, community colleges are not receiving as much funding as they need, right? When there isn't an equity-based approach to distributing funding, then those who lose are going to be those that are already historically marginalized, right? Black and brown communities for the most part. So I do think that it matters how that funding is distributed by each state, right? And in addition to that, again, I really would, I think the second part of your question was what policy would I advocate for? And one of the things I saw in the report is to sort of shift our mindset around our formulas into what determines success, right? To really think about it would require sort of a systemic change, right? Of how we determine success that's not only on those numbers that I've already mentioned a lot of times, right? Enrollment, retention rates, graduation rates, but even things like employability after a student graduates, right? Their civic engagement, right? How likely how the students develop in their identity, right? Do they understand themselves in the world as leaders, right? So those are the policies that I would really advocate for.
You know, as we close out, I think a lot about what you just shared. First, just want to give kudos to those at the state of Illinois, some of our electeds doing the work in restructuring our funding formulas to be more equity based, not equality based, equity based. And if you out there are watching this and you want to know how you can be involved in doing that, I implore you to actually reach out to your elected officials and encourage them to support those initiatives as well. You also can be involved with what we're doing at Chicago Scholars by visiting our website, chicagoscholars.org, signing up to volunteer. We always need more people in the fold. And if you don't have the time, Treasure is also in testimony a big part of that. So share our work and click that donate button too. And finally, as we are in the weekend of celebrating Dr. King's birthday, I do want to leave us with a quote. Dr. King always said the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The reason I love that quote is the action part of that is bending. And we only do this by bending it together. So Jackie, I want to thank you for being one of the benders of this moral arc and bending it towards equity for students of color in your work. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. This is episode 1 of College Matters. We'll be back soon. Tune in, watch our social media channels. We'll advertise the upcoming episodes. This is something we're going to continue. So thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.